Hi, and welcome to episode 2 of the Informing Choices mini pod. I'm delighted to be joined today by Jennifer Bryan. Jennifer is, now you have to correct me if any of these are wrong, but author, consultant, and speaker. Jennifer, tell us a little bit about you.
Oh, thank you very much for inviting me along to this, Steve. It's absolute thrill to be working with you and speaking to your audience here. I am a practicing change consultant. I've worked with well over 30 different organizations across the spectrum of different industries, public and private, for the last, well, actually over 20 years. So that is really my specialty in leading change. And my big motivator is to help, and I think that's what really gets me going in the morning. I love to help people, so that's where my motivation comes into working with organizations and the people within organizations on leading change.
And the topic of this piece is really about the future of change, and we'll get
Mm.
into that. But I think we will also see you, I'm sure, talking about the human perspective on change, which is something that I know was kind of in those words that you use there, and will also feature heavily in a book that you're publishing at the beginning of the year. And again, we'll talk about that a little bit
Yeah.
later on. So, in the context of the future of change, how have you found the pandemic has changed perspectives on change leadership, both yours and the people you talk to?
Yeah, so before COVID, typically the people side of change was more of, in my opinion, an afterthought from my clients. In the base case, people would bring me on board many times when things are going wrong. Um, and once they've just already got things going, they know what they're doing, they're going down that line. However, now with the pandemic, with so much uncertainty, the process seems to be changing slightly, and many leaders are now trying to figure out, well, how are we going to navigate through these tricky waters and plan for effectively an unknown future? And so as a result of that, which, as you well know, that takes some foresight. But one of the things that bringing change and leading change into that means that we can start being more proactive with it rather than reactive. And I think that's the big change the pandemic is bringing. It's allowing us to focus more on the possibilities in the future and be proactive with how we're going to deal with all of this rather than just kind of dealing with what's right in front of us.
I mean, I know you say that if change isn't rocket science, then it's something else. So what is it? Because you've actually laid out there a really complex piece of context, and
Mm.
that's one of the reasons I think it is very hard at the moment for people to change. So if change isn't rocket science, what is it?
It's about people, and many times that and people are not, A plus B does not always equal C when it comes to people. And that's why it's not rocket science, because you can have the same person, but in a similar situation, but their reactions and their behaviors might be very different because there's other things that are going on in their world and for them. And all too often, this gets lost in the overcomplicated methodologies and technology focused approaches to change. And leaders many times get seduced by the glitter and gizmo and forget to pay attention to that ordinary everyday needs of the people who, at the end of the day, for all practical purposes, are the ones who are going to make the change happen anyway.
Yeah.
So, as leaders and managers of change, we need to anticipate change and anticipate what is going to be going on for them, what is happening for them in that context, the whole of them. And one of the things that the pandemic has lent us to be able to really start to understand a bit more is, it's not just that work face or that professional person we are managing. We're actually managing a whole person. Maybe they've got a dog in the background or a cat that jumps in front of the screen, or some care responsibilities that they have to pause and go take care of. All of these things, and that makes up that whole person. And that's that is why it's very much about the people and what all that entails, not rocket science.
Do you think that to some extent the pandemic and the implications of it in terms of the way that we've worked might help to humanize aspects of the way that we think about enterprise and organizations? And I hesitate to use the word organization because I think sometimes we might use that word to disguise the fact that actually we're talking about people. So
I
could
I
it
hope
help?
I hope so. I actually genuinely hope so, that it makes us more humanistic in our approaches to how we view situations and lead people through change. Particularly, I mean, change is happening all the time. It's all around us. There's little incremental changes, there's big, huge transformational changes. So, and in an organization, which is a community of people. So, I agree with you. It is about people, but it's a community of people, and a community of people who identify through a brand, and they also have a set of norms and ways of working and talking and communicating and being that brings them together. And that is something that that's really quite important, and something that needs to be always, I think, taken into consideration.
Yeah.
And something that, and so I hope the silver lining on the dark cloud of the pandemic, I hope it does make us be a little bit more humanistic and think that little bit more.
So I guess that's one of the lessons that we should take away for future change programs. But what are the other things that you'd point to? What are the other things that you think change programs should include differently in the future?
Well, there's a couple of things I think we always need to bear in mind. One is, regardless of all the planning, application, and analysis we do, things are going to change. And we need to remember that. Plans change. They change in the middle, the start, near the end, all the time. Plans don't go according to plan. And any project manager who's out there listening is going, yeah, I know that one. But the thing is, it's to understand that's okay. It's not that that's a bad thing or a good thing. It's to say, all right, let me take a step back. I need to reassess the situation, understand the new perspective from the people's point of view, and then implement some new actions and reprioritize based on that. Many times people will continue to plow on their plan even though things have changed. And what they need to do is just take a step back, breathe, and rethink things through. So that's the first one, or rather the second lesson, and take forward. The other one is, we need to expect resistance. Resistance is natural, it's human, it's fine. So many people get scared of it. And I'm going, it's okay. If I was to say to everybody who's listening here, I've got £5 million to hand over to you, everybody's initial reaction is going, oh, she's having a laugh there. It's to resist, even though I'm sitting there trying to hand you a whole bunch of money. I'm not actually, but you get my point. Our natural reaction is to resist, even positive change, much less any other kind of change. So it's important to remember, as leaders and managers of change, that to not be afraid of the resistance. It's to expect it and learn to anticipate it so that we can manage it. So that's the next one. The other one is good, clear, concise, and regular communication. I was talking to even a friend the other day whose school is not sending out communications clearly to parents about how many cases they've got going on in the school and so forth. And the problem is, when your communications are not open, honest, and transparent, then rumors go awry. People start to make their own conclusions. They also, and actually, most importantly, it leads to distrust.
Yeah.
So in order to, and when it comes to delivering change, trust is imperative. And in order to build that trust, you need that good, clear, concise, regular communication that's open, honest, and transparent. And those are the big things that I would say are the lessons going forward, and that they're really quite critical when it comes to delivering change.
Now, you and I have had a number of conversations over this year about the role that foresight can play in change. So what do you see that role as? How do you see foresight impacting the way that we lead change?
Right. So we recognize that typically people use and seek out change management on that reactive level. We've already discussed that. But I think utilizing the scenarios, particularly the scenarios that you have helped create, Steve, that really gives us a framework for us to then apply the AB change model, which is the leading change model, in a very practical and concise way. We can take a look at exactly what it is that we are looking to do as leaders, because when we are trying to plan in this unforeseen world, having some frameworks in place enables us to create some plans, create some key messages, get some visions in place so that we have a rough idea of the potential directions we were going to be going down, so that we can make that proactive leap in regards to leading and managing the change, rather than, because if we don't do that, actually I'm saying it this way, if we don't do that, then we'll just end up being reactive. And as you have said 1,000 times, if you always get what you've always got, you always I forget what that's
You always do what
you
you've
always
always done. You'll always get what you've always got.
That's it,
That's the one.
exactly. So if we want to make things different, if we want to do things differently, which we need to do, there's evidence all around us. M&S have got a new vision. Loads of other organizations got new visions and are taking major lessons away from all of this. And we need to define what this is for us. And in order to do that, having those frameworks really enables us to be able to make that happen.
I think if I was to sort of summarize that, you seem to be telling me that there's a reality of our uncertainty and complexity that we need to not be afraid of, but somehow embrace and communicate
Yes.
that and ensure that comes into our change practice.
Well, definitely. And taking that holistic approach as a result of all of that enables us to do that, because we're looking at the whole picture, not just a narrow perspective.
So it would be verging on criminal of me not to let you talk about a project that I know you've been working on. It's this book. So tell us about this book. Tell us when it's going to be launched, and how the book came about.
Right. So the book has been long in the making, to be fair. And I, just to give you a little bit of personal insight, it was a model I created when I did my dissertation nearly 10 years ago. And I'm a very practical person at heart. I wanted to create something that would answer the question that so many leaders were coming to me at the time. I was coaching a lot of senior leaders then, and they would say, yeah, Jennifer, I know about Kotter, I know about this, know about that, but what the heck do I do with this thing on my desk? And so I decided that was the question I wanted to answer, was what the heck do they do with this thing on their desk? And so I went and did the research, created the AB change model, but still keeping that practical hat on. I wanted to be able to apply it in enough different scenarios and different organizations that I could then share those case studies, so not just the theory of the model itself, but the application of the model, and hence the theory in action from that standpoint. And so that is what took the time. So I've spent the nearly past 10 years, I had in my head this magical number of 25 case studies, which I got to. And so in the book, it shares the theories and the actual model itself and how it came about, along with the other approaches that I take to delivering change. But I think the real added value is the application and how that has worked either. And in some cases, it's been applied well, and in some cases it wasn't applied very well, because people are people, and I'm only one person. I can influence and I can persuade and I can discuss, but I can't make the horse drink. So so that, so it shows a little bit of the good, the bad, the ugly in there, in regards to case studies. So that's the book. It's called Leading People in Change, a Practical Guide. It's a very short book. It's not painful at all. It's just over 100 pages, about 150 pages. So it's a nice, quick, easy read, with lots of reflective questions and thoughts at the end of each chapter as well.
And when's this published?
Oh, yes. And of course, it comes out 1st of February 2021. It's available now for pre-orders on amazon.co.uk. So you can go ahead and do some pre-orders, but it actually launches on the 1st of February.
And if anyone listening wants to find out more about you and what you do, how can they do that?
They can reach out to me on www.abchangeconsultancy.com, or they can send me an email, jennifer.bryan@abchangeconsultancy.com.
Jennifer, that's fantastic. Thank you for being a guest on this new exploration into a world of podcasts that I'm trying. It's wonderful to have you. Thanks ever so much for your insight.
Thank you so much for having me. It really was fun and a pleasure.